Welcome, everybody, to the Basecamp Podcast, a free educational podcast powered by Pacific Northwest Fundraising. Today on the podcast, we're diving into the intersection of social media and sustainable fundraising. Joining me is Eddie Allen, founder of Pacific Northwest Fundraising and head guide. Eddie and his team are behind some of the most thoughtful, high-impact nonprofit campaigns in the region. We're talking about the difference between engagement and conversion and how small nonprofits can stop chasing likes and start building lasting donor relationships. Eddie, welcome back, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ryan. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. But let's go ahead and just get started with the elephant in the room, right?
Yeah.
Tackle the thing that everybody's not wanting to talk about.
Yeah.
Facebook and LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people still see Facebook likes or LinkedIn impressions as winning social media marketing. You know, they see them as wins. What's your take on that?
If I had $1 for every time I mentor or I say this, I always say Facebook likes are not a donor strategy. Okay. They're an engagement strategy, and part of that donor stewardship, which we're going to talk about today, but they're not a donor strategy. What we look at is like our job at Pacific Northwest is to guide the followers or your followers on Facebook along a stewardship journey, turning their attention into action. Social media is just one channel in a broader fundraising strategy. Our goal is sustainable donor support, not vanity metrics.
Okay, so likes and impressions and all that sort of stuff. I agree. It's good. It's a good measure of engagement, but you call them vanity metrics. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the difference between, again, we're a fundraising and development company first that uses social media as engagement to build trust and credibility and connection. They're important. Reach is important, but nonprofit sustainable fundraising is moving those followers from that audience into your database to start the donor development process, right? And that can be from like signing up on a newsletter or understanding that your campaign, something like the upcoming Give More 24, is more than just a one-off gift, okay? And so that real donor stewardship and sustainable fundraising is what happens after that like, right? How do you get them involved in the time, talent, and resources of your organization? So we look at that, to be able to do that, our content is built around 3 major pillars. It's kind of been the foundation of nonprofit marketing in the sense that those content needs to be around inspirational, educational, informational. And then the narrative really needs to be storytelling based on the hero's journey framework. And that's how you emotionally connect supporters to the mission.
That was a lot of information stated very concisely, and I like that. There's a lot to dissect there.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I'm latching on to is that when we're talking about turning attention into action, right? That action isn't necessarily a big, grandiose thing. It's not a donation right away of $50,000 or whatever.
That's
it might
right.
be signing up for a newsletter.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's an interesting point that you bring up. 3 out of 4 major gifts start with a gift of under $250 now, right? So that ability to steward that one-time gift or the gift from your campaign into major donor development is so important, right? And, we use some wealth screening tools to be able to identify donors that way. So it's just much more than Facebook likes, right? It's not a donor strategy, it's engagement, but it's what you do with that information and how you start to develop relationships for more than just that one-time gift. And that's a hard thing to do. And that's again, the difference between how we work with our clients versus a direct social media company.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about that. Now you actively describe Pacific Northwest Fundraising as more than just a social media company. What makes your approach different?
Yeah. I mean, so we're going to look at, a couple things. Like we're going to look at a year-long, content or thematic for our client. Okay. And then we're going to break those down into, things that connect with the mission. So, think of like this month currently is in April is a fair housing month. So if you're a nonprofit that has something to do with the homelessness issue in our community, like where you can run a recurring giving campaign during this month, right? Which really connects with your mission, makes it much more sticky, right? So that storytelling that you build around a fair housing month initiative kind of ties that all together. May is actually National Mental Health Month, I believe. So again, if you're a nonprofit in that space, like how can you build a campaign around that monthly initiative that highlights your story, the people that you serve, so on and so forth. And that storytelling, right? That's what connects people to your mission and inspires them for time, talent, and resources. And then you're able to steward them into your organization, right? So again, we build out that monthly thematic calendar, look at the entire year from a 30,000 foot level, and then manage those campaigns, typically like end of year giving, recurring giving. Here locally, I have Give More 24. And then, a lot of nonprofits have a gala or event. So those are the campaigns that make up that. But what's the story in between, right? What's the story of the people you serve, the mission, the testimonials, that hero's journey, which then brings that all together. And that makes it much more compelling than just getting a Facebook like.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, you know that I'm obsessed with narrative in things.
I do.
Yeah. Because the story is the anchor, right? It doesn't really matter what you're talking about. When you, as a nonprofit leader, when you got into it, I'm assuming it's not because you pulled out a list of causes to fight for and you're like, that one looks good. It's probably because you know people's stories.
It's, it's just, the very basic. It is that storytelling 101. Again, based on the hero's journey, which has been around for like 2,000 years. And then how do you weave that? The story of your nonprofit, the story of the people you serve, or the watershed you protect, or, the mountain that you protect, whatever that may be, and sharing that in ways that matter, right? The ways that connect, the ways that inspire action, right? And that, again, we typically look at as time, talent, and resources. We're talking about sustainable funding. So, specific campaigns on social media, which would, result in a donation. Where how we look at it then is that's this person now into your organization that you have the opportunity to build a relationship with. Just because somebody gives you $25 doesn't mean they can't give you $50,000, right? And that's the thing. A lot of organizations or 100 or whatever that may be, who they fail at that next level stewardship and just see it as a one-off, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a one-off. Again, especially with that statistic, that 3 out of 4 major gifts start with a $250 donation. Well, you're not going to get to that 6-figure gift without developing a relationship.
And that's where something like a year-round plan comes into effect and helps cultivate those.
100%, right? And again, connecting those different things, again, there's usually months or specific days, like, there's an Earth Day that happens every year, right? So if you're an environmental nonprofit, you can run a little micro campaign on the day before, the day of, and the day after, okay? On putting out information. So there's all these things that connect that way. Also then whatever that nonprofit's doing, maybe they have a volunteer day and different things like that, right? So again, humanizing it around the storytelling, who you serve, what that outcome is, the impact of your dollars to the people you serve and to our community. That's the storytelling that needs to be out there.
Would it behoove a nonprofit? That's my Scrabble word that I'm throwing in there for today.
Nice, I like it.
But would it behoove a nonprofit to be choosy with what days that they make the center focus? And I know that this is something that you would guide them through, but for somebody just listening to this, there are a lot of national days that happen every month. Is it good for them to hit all of those, or should they be strategic?
Oh, be strategic, right? Things that connect to your mission. It's quality versus quantity, right? There's certain time frames to look at across the different platforms. Although over the years that's gotten smaller, right? As social media has become ubiquitous, there's a good Scrabble word for you. But we typically have outbound days on Tuesdays and Thursdays and move that around accordingly, to the audiences. But yeah, I mean, that to look at it big picture, to understand where there's direct connections, on a national, month initiative or short-term day things, we find that really, really impactful, right? It really makes a connection and immediate, meaningful engagement, for that nonprofit year round.
I agree with that. I think that's a smart way to handle it. And I like that that's something that you help guide these organizations through is picking what to really focus on, right? Because like you said, there's recurring giving, end of year giving, locally give more 24, major events, galas. You've got holidays, weekends, birthdays. I don't know, all these sorts of things that they could be talking about on social media.
Yeah. That's why it's so important to have that storytelling, that it weaves all that together, or it can look very, promotional, informational, right? I mean, so you got to have the blend of information, educational, and inspirational, right? So that storytelling part of it. You don't want it just to become a community calendar or a place like that, right? Yes. Or your audience tunes out. Okay. Mm-hmm. So again, what that looks like, how that looks like over the whole year. And then, like I said, interlaying those campaigns where we are going to ask for a donation or some kind of call to action, but you can't miss the other part to keep that human aspect of it and the why the people, are passionately connecting with the mission of that nonprofit.
Yes. Yes. And you've mentioned this before in previous episodes of the podcast, but just as far as making those connections with people, right? To get a call to action to convert to something more. How many of those touches does it take before people convert into taking action? Yeah.
We call them like organizational touches, and depending on which marketing, subscription, you read and listen to, it's anywhere between, I've seen on the low end 7 and the high end 27. Personally, I think 7 is too low and 27 feels a little high. So somewhere in the middle, 12, 15, 17 kind of range. So again, that reinforces the need for consistent, meaningful engagement across channels year round, right? You don't want to make the mistake that if the major fundraising event for your organization is a gala, that you slam all that information into the last 90 days, the 90 days before the event. It'll overwhelm the channel. It'll tune out the audience. Plus, they've made no connection over the past year. And now you're right back to, asking for money again. Okay. And we see this happen all the time. And you can just watch the engagement numbers go down, right? The emails don't get opened, the social media, 25% of those emails will go away. And that's a bad place to be, right? So again, to think about the organizational touches that you're going to do for the entire year, and then being able to segment those campaigns and segment those donors into specific messaging that you want them to receive. It's a science and a bit of an art too, right? I mean, both. And, you can, at times where, it's the end of the year, oftentimes you can get too much out there, right? I mean, everybody's slammed with stuff at the end of the year. So you got to pick your spots and know when to amplify and when to kind of step back. But again, you have to have something for the year round. You can't just not talk to donors or engagement. And we're talking social media. I'm also including emails to your database in this outreach platform. Okay. You can't just wait for the last 90 days, and have a race to the end. It just doesn't work.
It reminds me of, I liken it to the difference between your child and your friend. So let's assume you have a child and a friend, and the only time you've been hearing from them lately is when they need money, right?
Well, that's exactly right. That's right.
Eventually, you're going to stop responding to that friend, but the child, hopefully, you've had a much longer and healthier relationship with, and you continue to hear from them about other things. So even though they might be asking for money a lot, there's still that ongoing connection. There's that
Yeah. And you have to be, and there's a way to ask for it too, right? I mean, it's in support of the mission. And so to show what that actual gift, that donation is going to go towards, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, you got to frame it that way. We're asking for a gift or support, right? Help support the mission.
Yes.
There's a lot of language and keys with that are softer and frankly need to be used for nonprofit marketing in that way. Again, so.
Yeah. And you were mentioning too, it was a huge number. You said that when you overload people with information and you only show up for these fundraising cycles, that 25% of the emails, I think you said, just go away. They stop opening.
Yeah. They'll unsubscribe. It's too much, right? So I haven't heard from, this channel, this nonprofit, and all of a sudden I'm getting slammed full of that. It's unsubscribe. And so, you typically see rates of up to 25% that are going to unsubscribe and don't want to get any more information from you. So you've got to, cultivate. You've got to cultivate and steward, your social media audience, especially then if you want to have them to provide time, talent, resources, and gifts to the organization. Yeah.
And this is especially important for nonprofits, I feel. Like more so than a retail company or, somebody who's selling a thing, right? Because if you're selling a thing, you have a nationwide audience. For a nonprofit, you might be much more local. And so 25% of people no longer paying attention to you locally is going to have much more of an impact than if they have a big national audience, right?
100%, right? And then what happens then, right? That follower, or just like in business, right? They go to another company. Maybe they start following another similar nonprofit, right? So you're losing, 25% of your database. You're not connected. That's going to directly affect your donations and sustainability of your organization.
Yeah, immensely. And you talk about Pacific Northwest fundraising and data. Right? Pacific Northwest fundraising and open rates and click-through rates.
Yeah.
And you talk about being able to help these nonprofits get those rates well above industry standard. How is Pacific Northwest fundraising helping with that? How are they making that happen?
So again, going back to those 3 pillars and then, segmenting, the list, relevant content and strong storytelling, right? So going back to this storytelling, we see rates, regular open rates of 36 to 40% and click-through rates of 3 to 6%, right? Because it's relevant content that people want to connect with. Okay. And that's the key. It can't just be harsh, I guess, or just show up, right? I mean, it has to flow and it has to inspire. Right?
I can't just show up and say, hey, I'm still here. I'd like more money, please. No,
it just doesn't work that way. It's relationships. So, I mean, it's a relation, do it harsh. It's rude, right? I mean, the first thing, you can't just really, the first thing ask for money or something, right? I mean, can we go on a date first before you try to marry me? So how does that look? How are you connecting? And if it's relevant and it's content that folks want to see and connect with, following those guidelines, that's what brings it to that 36 to 40%, 3 to 6% click-through rate and moves people. So we're actually then, the cool thing is we're creating a channel of new donors, right? I mean, people are worried about that. Where are next donors coming from? Well, if they're following you on Facebook, we can literally create a channel from them, from signing up from a newsletter or the one-time gift for Give More 24 and move those folks, steward them into this content and engagement and create new people and new opportunities for donations into your organization.
See, and this is such an interesting concept to me, right? I've been studying it for years. I will continue to study it because it's fascinating. And I think that there's a misconception that viewing data like this can be shrewd, right? And it's not. It's very important because how can you have relationships with anyone if you don't know how to build them?
Or if you don't know where they're at in the first place.
Yeah.
Right. That goes back to another, our last podcast about, database management, but 100%, right?
Well, and I think that this will line up, but I'm going to ask you for clarification here. But there were some insights that you shared recently from a Metricool LinkedIn study, right? Like,
sure.
How does that relate to all of this? Reiterate it for the listeners if you could. What did you take away from that?
Yeah, Metricool is a platform that we use to manage our clients' social media. Okay, it handles all of them in one place. I forget what the one that years ago was called, but it's similar to that. Escapes my memory right now. Anyway, so it's always this interesting thing about opening up LinkedIn as a channel for a nonprofit. Okay, Kirsten, who is our Director of Communications and Social Media and Branding, did a really nice study on that. Also, this Metricool study came up, and some of the things that really resonated with nonprofits is that small nonprofits actually have an edge on LinkedIn right now. So pages with under 1,000 followers, and that's typically most nonprofits, right, saw a 22% increase in impressions last year. So video content is up 73% in reach. And what's really cool about that, simple videos, and when I mean a simple video, I'm talking about like a voiceover slide deck, which is really easy to make, right? 4 to 6 slides, and you can do a voiceover narrative on a voice memo on your iPhone, which presents as a video, right? They perform great. Carousels and polls are underused but powerful. So if you upload a PDF and LinkedIn, lets you slide through it, they call that a carousel. Polls have 206 more reach. And again, this is quality, not quantity. Posting 10 to 12 times a month is the sweet spot with that. So the study that Kirsten did was also really interesting on the differences between the two audiences. And then they used to say don't add links, but you can now have links. Links are okay, right? To bring that person from LinkedIn back to your website or some type of call to action. Again, you have to be really careful with it. It is a business page. I don't know if anybody's really unlocked fundraising from it. I'm not sure that it should be that way. But there's a place to engage that way, and it's okay now to all the data about adding a link and then moving them over to your website or to sign up for that newsletter. So yeah, some really good news out there about LinkedIn. Don't overwhelm that. Again, 10 to 12 a month is the max, right? Like in Kirsten's study, like highlighting some of your partnerships and connections, like let's say you got a sponsorship from a major corporation. So maybe you thank them on LinkedIn and tag them, so you're actually getting into that to their audience as well, and just thanking them, right, for that. And so that's the kind of gratitude post, if you will, to use on LinkedIn. But yeah, some really interesting data that came out of that Metricool study.
You could combine those too, really. Like if that's a great way to get into a network and stuff, if you did that thank you as a video, like you were mentioning, that's going to have 73% more reach.
We're doing so many of these. Okay. Again, I'm just fortunate to work with really smart people, and that's Kirsten's idea on creating a 4 to 6 slide deck. Okay. With graphics and just doing the voiceover, creating a narrative for that. And these things are 60 seconds, 45 to no longer than 90, but I think that sweet spot's right around 60 seconds. And, we see, cause think about how people consume content now, right? Short little bursts.
Yep.
And video is sticky. You can, put that in an email. You can have it on social media. It can be a blog post. It can go anywhere, on your Instagram, on your TikTok, whatever, right? Your YouTube channel, all of those things. and it works for all of them, right? It works for all of them. And, so again, we tried to do things like we used a service called Vooch, which would send an email and give, bullet points for people to record their own videos. And it's a great platform, just nobody ever did it. So the idea between having a slideshow, voiceover slideshow, which again it presents as video, right? And they're really easy to do. So we've really leaned into that quite a bit.
Well, so speaking just of putting yourself out there on video, right? Because I think you're absolutely right. I know my attention span is shot. It's not what it was 10 years ago, But I think that also is because the medium is evolving, right? And we're able to get a lot more information and a lot more connection out in a much shorter amount of time by utilizing things like video. And I know that what I'm about to ask is something that you feel strongly about, right? But so like being on video, putting yourself out there, if you are the one doing it exclusively for a nonprofit, right? You kind of become the face of that. What is your take on the idea that a nonprofit needs someone like a development director or an executive director to be that face of the organization?
Yeah. It's something, Brian, we hear often all the time. It's kind of based on an older model that doesn't really pull up anymore. Also, I think people conflate face-to-face relationships building with the idea that a single person must be the brand or the face of the nonprofit, right? Of course, there are going to be a lead on the face-to-face relationships, but you have to be really careful. I mean, the fact of the matter is, and one of the reasons I created Pacific Northwest Fundraising is the average tenure for those roles now is under 16 months, according to the Chronicle of Philanthropy. Okay. And the truth is, a brand is not a person. The brand is the mission and the people you serve. Okay. And, sure, leadership can and should provide visibility 100%, right? Sharing testimonials or championing content builds credibility, but the organization must own its own brand and messaging. Again, conflating the fact that, you do need that person or, to have the face to face, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're the face. The brand or the face isn't a person. It's the mission, the people you serve, right? And people who are actually their brand, that's a really, really hard thing to do and be, right? I mean, there's a great local example. Our friend, Sherry McMillan at Northwest Personal Training, who's been on this podcast. Sherry is a fantastic marketer and she truly is someone who is her own brand, right? She lives that lifestyle. But that model isn't realistic for most nonprofits, right? Especially with that turnover. I like to think about it this way. Most people know Bezos and who Zuckerberg are, right? Mm-hmm. But who's the CEO of Coca-Cola? That's my point.
No idea.
I mean, that's my point, right? I mean, so the thing is to let the mission lead, right? Let the outcomes and story drive the brand. That's what resonates and endures in the community. And most nonprofits have folks on their board who are community leaders, okay? And to amplify their credibility around the organization is huge for that, right? Just in them resharing posts or doing one of these short testimonials that, I'm a board member of XYZ nonprofit and that kind of thing. That thing, so they have name recognition, right? I mean, I won't name them, but I know many of the people on boards who have 2,000 plus followers or things like that who are connected in the community. That's what's really sticky. And that's what gains credibility. Again, a development director, and I've been one, and an executive director, you're one person, you only be one place at a time, right? So how one person can't do all that, okay?
No.
They can be strategic and they can go to things and that kind of thing. But I think an organization really needs to think about that messaging as the organization owns it, right? That they own the data, they own that, and how you're going to manage it. Because with that, and that's the reality of the turnover, but Even if it wasn't just true, people leave, they get married, they get jobs, they do things, and the organization has to continue. And that's the mission, and that's the support, and that's the people that you serve. So let the mission lead.
You're absolutely right. And I see brands like Coca-Cola or Duolingo or, Progressive, Geico, those sorts of things. Those people are taking that branding and owning it, and it doesn't belong to any one person. And they have really robust social media teams, right?
They do.
Like, keeping that going.
I think that's a good cautionary tale too. Remember that they have very robust teams. They spend millions and millions of dollars on marketing. And I'm not picking on Coke, but Coke launched New Coke. Okay, so.
Crystal Pepsi. Let's not.
I'm just saying. The point is, you can also look. This is important as this engagement strategy. As a guy with a digital space background, you also can't get into nuances of everything, right? And be mission focused. Make sure use Grammarly. Don't spell anything wrong. Follow those pillars of inspirational, informational, education, and you'll be fine. Okay. And we just see a lot of clients that are just, it's got to be the perfect post. Like they're writing something for Wyden and Kennedy and you're going to win an award. Again, don't spell anything wrong. Stay within those pillars and you're going to be okay. Right. You're going to be fine.
Like you said, just right now, again, this is an engagement strategy, engaging, right? You're talking with somebody, you're having a conversation. You're not talking at them. And social media is where these conversations happen these days. So it still surprises me when I see businesses and nonprofits just all over the place, still being on the fence about investing in their social media. What would you say to those clients? What kind of case do you make?
Oh God. I had something I was going to say about that.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
No, what was it about? About they're not doing this or the engagement. What I wanted to talk about was the fact that they're trying to do this on the day of, right? That's the problem, right? They're trying to get content out the day of. And that's not a strategy.
It's being reactive instead of proactive.
So that's the way to put that, right? I mean, so again, when you look at a big picture and we give our content to our clients 2 weeks, like the 15th of the month prior at the minimum, right? So they have, 72 hours to make any edits. We do that and then it gets loaded and they never have to think about it again, right? So we always want to be that far ahead. And for some of our clients, we're out a quarter, right? Take a big swing of that and what that's going to look like. Because again, I know if next month is mental health month and the days in it and so on and so forth. And what the storytelling is, have we picked that month to be a recurring giving campaign, so on and so forth. And we can start creating content that way. Yeah, we don't want to be reactive. And that's where nonprofits frankly make mistakes. Oh, I got to get a post out today. Right?
Yes.
So, yeah. Okay. So your other question was the case that clients still on the fence.
Well, and I think this feeds right into that, right? I think that when you don't keep social media in the forefront of your mind as this is where the conversations are happening, right? It's really easy to become reactive instead of proactive. And sometimes to just be like, you know what? Social media doesn't work for me. It just doesn't. So maybe it doesn't work for you because you're not using these types of practices, right?
100%. And I always refer to it in-house, like engagement media, right? Social media is a platform with it, but what's your engagement strategy, right? With social media being a distribution channel, email, video, so on and so forth. It's engagement, media, not just social media, right? Because everybody's going to default to like Facebook or Instagram, but it's really those platforms for engagement that you're using. So it's a different little twist on it. I think it's our twist on it on fundraising development being engagement media versus social media in that sense, right?
I really like that because just changing that first word changes the feeling that I get from the term.
Well, I agree with you. And it's not original. I'm sure I read it someplace, but to me, that just makes more sense in the nonprofit space than just looking at it as direct social media, because it's engagement marketing, right? How are we engaging that? And then how do you steward that Facebook like into donor development?
So how do you do that? Like you say, how do you turn social media engagement into sustainable donor support?
So we have a case statement, that's actually the title.
Oh, there you go.
Turning social media engagement into sustainable donor support. So I've got a case statement with that. It shows, without a donor strategy behind your engagement, you're just spinning your wheels, just like we talked about, or you're reactive, not proactive. We use data tools, smart segmentation, campaign structure to guide casual followers into real supporters, right? And even though I have, major gift background, technology has shown us that this engagement, that 3 out of 4 major gifts start with a gift of $250 or less. So that's why you have to have that year-round engagement. That $25 donor from Give More 24 could become your next $100,000 supporter. So with the right stewardship and tools like wealth screening and personalized follow-up, we help nonprofits move from one-off gifts to true donor development. And that's what makes us different, right? We're not just creating content. We're building a channel from likes to engaged long-term donors.
From likes to engaged long-term donors. I think that there are people who can be very engaging. I think that there are people who can be very charismatic, very interesting to watch, right? And we keep talking about engagement media versus social media. We talk about having conversations with people rather than talking at them, being proactive instead of reactive. But I think that all of those things mean very little if you don't have a strategy that you are applying them to. And that's where you come in. That's what Pacific Northwest Fundraising specializes in, right? Is teaching nonprofits how to do this, helping them do this, and helping them have that year-round strategy that they can guide their audience through.
100%, Brian. That's the big picture strategy for the nonprofit, and then interlay those campaigns throughout the year that connects with their mission, right? And it's a science and an art, and it's something we feel really good about how we do it and what the results have been for our clients. Again, we also warn nonprofits not to go down the rabbit hole of social media too, right? I mean, in the sense of, again, I'm referring back to one of our previous podcasts about, when you say development, it means like 30 different things. And yes, it's important, but it's an engagement to have this one-to-one relationship with donors, right? And so, we want to get to that. Okay. We want to get to that. And you can't just stop at this part of it, which again is kind of an issue, right? Or you get caught in the minutia that I've got to turn out, nonprofit becomes more of a publishing house. And cause I got to get out my newsletter. I got to get out the post today and all those things. And relationship building gets put to the back. And we want to make sure that relationship building is at the forefront.
I had never thought of it that way before, that you can really easily become a publishing house.
See it quite a lot. And I think that because you've got, let's say you got a major nonprofit, has a really big budget and they got a staff of 25 folks, right? Mm-hmm. They got a development director. They got an assistant development director. They got a communications manager. They got an in-house grant writer. They got a membership coordinator. They got a database person, and you're one person trying to do all that. Right. So we see what this major nonprofit is doing. We're a smaller nonprofit, and we certainly want to emulate that because they're super successful. Right. So, but in that organization, they have a person for each one of those jobs. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And so that person can get overwhelmed real quick, or, spend time on things that aren't true donor development. We want to manage this infrastructure fundraising and do that, pay for ourselves, be a return on investment, and free up that organization to create those relationships for major gifts, right? I mean, I think we're the best development assistant an organization can have, right? Like we're bringing 75 years of wisdom and experience into your organization. We can manage these campaigns. Our open rates, our metrics are well above industry standards. So this infrastructure aspect of it, you can just kind of plug and play, with us doing it, managing it. And now you've freed up the capacity of that development director, of that ED to actually go have that conversation. Because the statistics say they don't have the time to do it. And that's why they fail at 80% and in under 16 months.
Well, I think it's fantastic that you are available to be this kind of resource for nonprofits. And for anybody listening, if this episode resonated with you, and I feel like it really should have, but for everybody listening, if you're ready to turn your likes on social media into long-term donor support, if you're ready to figure out how engagement can drive real outcomes for yourself or for other nonprofits, connect with Pacific Northwest Fundraising, right? And the best way is through the website, right, Eddie?
Website, I think we'll have our link here, our outreach email, and also my HubSpot link to to schedule some time. So a couple different ways to get a hold of us, but yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, and the website is pacificnorthwestfundraising.us. We'll have those other links in there for the alternative ways to communicate and connect. And Eddie, just thank you again, man, for breaking down the strategy behind this content, because content on its own is just content.
It's just content. Yeah.
You got to shepherd your audience through the path that you want to guide them on. Thank you again, everybody, for listening today. Eddie, thank you for being here, man. My name is Ryan Philbrook. You've been listening to the Pacific Northwest Fundraising's Basecamp Podcast. Have a good one, everyone.